Welcome to the TalentGrow Show, where you can get actionable, results-oriented insight and advice on how to take your leadership, communication, and people skills to the next level and become the kind of leader people want to follow. And now, your host and leadership development strategist, Halelly Azulay.
Welcome back to episode 24 of the TalentGrow Show. This episode marks a full year since I started podcasting, and it has been exciting, fun, and definitely a learning journey. This episode features Aaron Hurst, who is a globally recognized entrepreneur and author. Cannot wait for you to listen to Aaron describe how do we find our purpose at work? How do we help those who work with us identify their purpose? How do we ensure that it all aligns with our organizational purpose? And eventually, how do we make all work feel like that really soul-satisfying pro bono work that people look for? Aaron describes some common myths about purpose and some common mistakes that leaders make and how we can avoid them. He also shares some statistics about how purpose-oriented people thrive and outperform others. He shares some great ideas for how you can ask specific types of interview questions to help you screen job candidates for the kinds of people who are those high-performing, thriving, purpose-oriented people. And in the end, as always, he shares an actionable tip plus a cool tool that you could use to help you put that tip to work. And this episode marks the beginning of a brand new tool that I'm offering, a free download called The 10 Mistakes Leaders Make and How to Avoid Them, that is available to listeners of the podcast. So listen to the end to hear how you can download it. Sneak peek, it's on the show notes. Okay, here we go. Episode 24 with Aaron Hurst. Welcome back to the TalentGrow Show. I'm Halelly Azulay, your leadership development strategist, and I'm happy to be here with Aaron Hurst, who is a globally recognized entrepreneur and CEO of Imperative, a technology platform that enables people to discover, connect, and act on what gives them purpose in their work. He's also the author of a book called The Purpose Economy and founder of the Taproot Foundation, where he was the catalyst and lead architect of the $15 billion pro bono service market. Aaron, welcome to the TalentGrow Show.
It's so fun to be here with you.
I'm really appreciative that you are giving the time, your busy time, to our listeners so we can talk about this thing you call purpose. But before we get into that, you have had an illustrious career. Supposedly you started at age 16, which I'm curious to know more about. And I really want you to try to encapsulate that just in a couple of minutes for folks. What has your professional journey been like?
Yeah, it's hard to do in a couple of minutes.
Yes.
I think, like a lot of people, there's a lot of ins and outs and ups and downs. But yeah, and I started my first business when I was 16 and have had sort of the entrepreneurial bug for a long time, and have a hard time actually ever joining anything. I always want to create things. But I did a lot of work as a student at the University of Michigan, creating courses around volunteerism and service learning, especially around doing volunteer work inside prisons in Michigan. Graduated, worked in the nonprofit sector for a few years in Chicago. And what I saw was that nonprofits were doing such important work, and their visions were so grand and so needed, but they'd sort of given up on ever actually achieving the scale of impact that we all knew they needed to. And as I looked at the business community, I saw they were really able to scale and make an impact on a much bigger level, and decided to go work in Silicon Valley to understand how scaling works, how you grow a business. And in 1997, I guess it was, moved to Silicon Valley and worked with 2 early stage startups. And for each of them was one of the first 10 employees, and saw them scale to over 200 employees, and really saw how they built their organizations. And what I learned was that money was absolutely a major variable, but perhaps a bigger variable was they were able to hire technical talent ahead of the need, unlike nonprofits who are always hiring behind the need. And they were able to bring in the marketing, tech, sales, whatever the resources were, to actually build the infrastructure to scale, and realize that there's a real need in the nonprofit sector to be able to bring more access to this kind of functional talent. And that inspired me to start the Taproot Foundation, with the goal of ensuring every nonprofit has access to the marketing, tech, HR, other resources they need. And as you mentioned, we scaled that up as a marketplace to over $15 billion a year. And now with affiliates around the world, including, we just surpassed 100,000 pro bono consultants in China, which is really exciting.
Wow.
But what I learned listening to all these pro bono consultants talk about their work is that they found pro bono work to be the most rewarding work of their career. And I at first was so inspired by that, but ultimately I left Taproot to start Imperative because I realized that it pointed to a bigger problem. We were treating pro bono like a supplement to address the fact that our core work, our core entree, if you will, wasn't nourishing us, and that we needed to address work itself. And really started to ask the question, how do we make all work feel like pro bono work? And that is really sort of the driving question behind our work at Imperative. So that's sort of a quick summary of the last 20 years.
Which is, of course, a big challenge, right? So thank you for taking it on, and you did a really good job. And I think that it's very inspiring to meet people who feel a sense of purpose. And it is inspiring to know about the work that you're doing, because you're certainly playing big. You know, you're not just trying to make tiny little incremental changes. It seems like you're trying to make huge groundswell kind of shifts in the culture. And I appreciate that. I saw you when you gave a keynote for a conference where we were both working for the same client. And, you know, you were on the stage and you talked about this idea about purpose, and you shared how important purpose is and how there are a lot of misconceptions about what purpose really is. And I know that when I work with leaders around the country, around the world, there's so much cynicism, it seems, about purpose. And, you know, I really appreciate that you're trying to help people connect that it isn't something that, you know, just a few lucky people get to do in their work, but that it's possible for everyone. So what are these myths about purpose?
Yeah, I mean, there's so many myths. And I realized leaving Taproot and starting Imperative and doing research and talking to leading academics, you know, from Adam Grant to Amy Wisniewski up at Yale, that, you know, I'd really been committing malpractice and helping to propagate myths that were actually getting in people's way around purpose. So I'm always happy to share my malpractice to help others avoid it. And the first myth, which is the most important one, is that cause and purpose are the same thing. Saw so many people who were looking for a cause. They felt like, if I want more meaning in my work, there has to be a cause behind it. I need to, you know that I have a passion for kittens, or I have a passion for, you know, homelessness, or whatever, or medicine, because they see so many stories about people who appear to have a fate to be part of a cause. Mm-hmm. And what we've found is that purpose and cause have almost no connection. That's really pretty minimal. And that, you know, you think about, there are a lot of people out there that have a lot of causes in their life and yet no purpose. And you also know people who have tremendous purpose in their work, and yet if you asked what's their cause, you wouldn't have a clue. We put way too much sort of reliance on the idea that purpose comes from something external or a specific topic. We saw also tons of nonprofit professionals at Taproot sign up to do pro bono work for other nonprofits. And my first reaction was like, what's wrong with you? Why would you do that? And what I came to understand was that they didn't find purpose in their day job, and they were looking for a way to supplement it. So I think this whole idea that, you know, going and working in the nonprofit sector or working on a cause is going to bring you meaning really misses the main point, which is that purpose is something that comes every day. And in fact, it's the little daily moments of purpose that actually are the most valuable. And that really brings us to the second major myth, which is people believe, because they think it's a cause, that it's going to come to them as a revelation, that somehow they're just going to suddenly wake up one day and have an experience that's going to cause them to suddenly find their purpose. It's going to be sort of handed down to them on a tablet. Instead of realizing it's really a day-to-day practice, and it's about little things, not about a specific thing. And the third major myth about purpose is that purpose is a luxury, that it's only once you get a certain amount of wealth or a certain title that you're allowed to have purpose. And this is very much sort of the old guard mentality out of Wall Street, out of consulting firms, to sort of pay your dues and then you can do what you want. And what we're learning now is actually purpose is what enables you to be successful from the get-go. So if you want to thrive, you need to make purpose a priority from day one. And there's I think no better example just to this idea that purpose isn't a luxury than Viktor Frankl's work. You know, he was a slave in a concentration camp in World War II. Right. And found meaning in that experience. So when I talk to people, I often challenge them to say, look, if your job is worse than being a slave in a concentration camp, like, you have a good case and I'm willing to talk to you. Otherwise, purpose is a choice. It's not a luxury, and it's up to you whether or not you want to have it.
Yeah, he wrote Man's Search for Meaning, right?
Yep, exactly.
Yeah, it's
great book.
Yeah, I know that it is one of the books that's mentioned by so many people as just a game changer. So, well,
it's such a parable. It's such a parable and puts things in such stark contrast.
Yeah.
For what we believe, and it makes you realize how much mythology is built into our work culture that actually steers us in the wrong direction.
Right. Definitely. I'll link to it in the show notes. And yeah, you mentioned how people think that like first I'll work my butt off in this boring job where I feel like I make no difference. And then I'll do something purposeful, like, the Bill Gates Foundation or something like that. So, okay, I want to dig into this a little bit. So people can find purpose in the momentary experiences of their work, right? And a sense of purpose can stem from the work that you do at your job. Can you talk a little bit more about how do you tap into that, or how do you identify it? If it doesn't come on Mount Sinai, then how do you find it?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think the thing that's really interesting here, and this really goes to another myth around purpose. We tend to think it has a lot to do with the job. We think it has a lot to do with the company, the industry, and those things all matter. But what we're finding in our research, and we just completed a study of the entire U.S. workforce around purpose. And what we found in collaboration with NYU was that there's really two different workforces in the United States. There's one that's purpose-oriented and one that's not. The people that are purpose-oriented are people who see work at its core as being about helping others and growing as human beings. That's why they work. And it's not that they don't need a paycheck. It's not that they don't want to get recognition. But at the core, every day, they see the work, whether it's a great job or a not so great job, as an opportunity to help people and to grow. And they basically create that opportunity for themselves versus play victim to their situation. And they represent about 28% of the US workforce. The other 72% largely see work as a necessary evil, a means to get a paycheck, a game of climbing the ladder, somehow thinking that when you get to the top of the ladder, you win something, which you don't. Spoiler alert. And that workforce, we found, underperforms in every measure. So people who are not working for helping others and self-development actually are lower performers. They, on every measure we've studied nationally, but then with giving companies like LinkedIn, West Elm, YWCA, you go on and on. Every organization we've studied, purpose-oriented people thrive. So what we've come to realize is that there's a lot of talk about employee engagement, a lot of talk about how do we as managers bring more purpose, but unless you hire the right people, you're really pushing a wet noodle. You really need to hire people who are purpose-oriented, and that's really where we're focused. Is how do you, as a manager, as a leader, hire people who are purpose-oriented from the get-go? Because they're the ones that are really going to show up in a big way, and that this really is a trait, and it's really hard to change people. You and I both know, on the romantic sort of relationship side, if you're dating someone who has not been faithful to the last 5 significant others, they're not going to be faithful to you. You don't have the ability to change them, don't have that hubris. And the same thing is true with employers. If you hire people who've never been engaged in a job and that aren't purpose-oriented, you're almost certain to see the exact same experience with you. Mm-hmm. So just letting go of that magical thinking and knowing that who you hire is the number one variable in terms of really building a purposeful culture.
So is what you're saying that having a sense of purpose is an innate trait, that it is not something that can be learned?
Yeah, we're seeing that basically it's a pretty steady trait. Once someone enters the workforce, they tend to either see work as being about helping others and self-growth or not. And that we don't see much change. I mean, it happens every once in a while, but we don't see much change until about the age 55, where we see a lot of people go through a midlife crisis. And coming out of that, you see a big jump in the number of people who switch their orientation to work. But it's not something that just changes from job to job. You may find more purpose in one job than another, but your fundamental orientation to work doesn't change.
So you're saying you can hire for that. Do you have any quick tips on how to do that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the key thing is, there's a couple of key things. One is to really describe the opportunity and the job in a way in which it's about what is the potential for relationships, impact, and growth. Those are the 3 things that purpose-oriented people want. They want to have great relationships at work, they want to be able to make an impact, and they want to grow. So really focus in on telling that story about the job, about the situation. I think the second is to really screen people for orientation. And we offer a psychological assessment that really helps you have a strong sort of confidence in whether or not someone's purpose-oriented. But you can also do a preliminary test just with asking some open questions. There's 3 areas that I think are worth probing. One is really around the question of, if the person were to win the lottery tomorrow, what would they do? And what we find is purpose-oriented people would continue to do some form of work or helping others. They wouldn't see a golf course as where they'd want to spend their time. They're really focused in on helping others and self-development in one way or another. The second is really around relationships and talking about the relationships from their past jobs. Purpose-oriented people tend to have an ability to show up as their full selves at work. and tend to build longer term relationships with coworkers. And you see that emerge. And the third is really something that, Google and Amazon, for example, are really good at screening for, which is someone's sense of gratitude. Do they feel like the world owes them something, or do they feel grateful for every day that they get to live and breathe and experience life? And you can again get to that in an interview, sort of what someone's fundamental attitude is. And those three questions give you a pretty good sense for whether or not someone's purpose oriented.
Wow, amazing. Well, that I think is going to help a lot of people, because hiring is really,
it's brutal.
Seems like the magic thing that makes a huge difference in getting the right people on the team. And
it does. And it's so hard. It is. Yeah. There's some people who can just do it intuitively. I think the reason I become such a student of this and put science behind it is because it was never intuitive to me.
Yeah.
I saw people who are really good at it, and I always got distracted by things about people that were the things you shouldn't hire for, but that I couldn't help myself but be drawn to. Mm-hmm. And being able to use more of a scientific approach has really made such a difference for me. And I know it's something that the vast majority of hiring managers get in their own way. It's one of the things that I was talking to Amazon about their hiring process, and they found that just doing a short survey created better results in terms of screening than doing a whole battery of qualitative interviews. When they look back at the quality of those employees. We as human beings are just innately untalented when it comes to hiring.
Yeah. And people, you follow your intuition, but then again, you shouldn't follow your intuition. No. It's really, it's very confusing. And it's definitely not my forte to teach people about hiring. I'm much better about how to help keep the people that you have engaged and how to make sure that they're growing in their job. So I appreciate everyone who does have an expertise on how to get the right people on the bus. And it sounds like what you've just given are very actionable suggestions. So thank you for that. You mentioned the psychological assessment that you have on your website. Is that one that I took?
No, it's not. It's a different.
It's a different one.
It's a different one. So we have one that we use for recruiters and hiring managers to help them screen candidates and look at the likelihood that someone's purpose oriented. But to your point about really, whether it's for you as an individual or as a manager, it's really important to understand what brings you purpose. And people don't get purpose from the same things. They all get it from relationships, impact, and growth, but there's so many different paths to that. And what we were able to do is create the first ever diagnostic tool that helps you in a short survey figure out, what is it that likely will generate purpose for you? So you can really tailor your work and your career around those things. And it's not about what profession. It doesn't tell you should be a zoologist or an accountant. It tells you how you should show up every day and where you should look to make an impact, which really helps make day-to-day decisions. And it's a great tool we found for managers to work with their teams to really understand their team members and really help them tailor their work to fit them.
Yeah. And I think we could probably do a whole episode just on that. I think we're almost out of time and I want to ask you at least 50 questions about it, but
no worries.
I did take it. I got the catalyst. So
now, which is so perfect for you. It's all about impacting society by sort of building, opportunity through knowledge and really, this podcast alone is just, goes to your belief that getting knowledge out there is going to help people, right?
Yeah, it's true. It's my whole career is oriented around that. So it's rang true to me when I read it.
Right. And a lot of people that wouldn't, to you, it probably feels really intuitive and such a dub, but for a lot of people, that isn't where they would go, right? They would want to do more like development of tools. They might want to do more to focus less on society and more on individuals. And we find that there's such difference in people's purpose type, and it makes such a huge impact on folks and why two people in the same jobs experience it so differently.
Mm. And so what you're saying is that leaders, if they can find out what someone's purpose type is, mm-hmm. should they change the way that person is expected to do work so that it is a better match for them?
I think it's everything from that and sort of thinking about what are the roles in this organization where ultimately that person's going to thrive the most, and really pathing them that way. But I think you don't have to be thinking that drastically. I think it can be about small things. So for example, with your job, you could do that so many different ways, right? The same job. You've decided to do a podcast because that's what fits with your purpose type. It's about, you could do the exact same goals and results, but there's 10 different ways to get there and helping them pick the ways that are best aligned with who they are. And then also helping them celebrate their success. So if someone is society oriented, they're going to get less of a sense of purpose from seeing one person impacted. They're going to want to see and be part of something bigger. Yeah. So helping celebrate that, for example.
People are apt to make mistakes when they move into leadership positions. And this podcast is oriented towards helping people who are already in a leadership role do a better job of leading, or people that are kind of thinking about moving up into a leadership role, get ready for it. So is there a common mistake that you see leaders making that you can help us avoid?
Yeah, I mean, beyond hiring, I think there's a couple things. I mean, one is don't project who you are onto other people. It's the same sort of rule of parenting. It's a form of narcissism where we assume people are going to benefit from our own path and our experience and should follow in our footsteps when they have different shoes and a different gait. So really taking the time to understand, especially around relationships impacting growth, like who your team members are. What are the relationships they need? What is the impact they need to feel? And how do they need to grow? Most leaders have no idea who their employees are when it comes down to it. They might know their name, a couple of their skills, but if you said what relationships matter to them, what impact matters to them, and in what ways do they need to grow, most leaders scratch their head. So just being able to really listen for those elements with your team. Mm-hmm. I think the second is, I guess third. First is hire the right people. Second is really know those pieces. And then it's just really helping manage their career to enable them to make that impact they want to make, and trusting that if people are making the impact they want to make, odds are your team and your organization will thrive.
Yeah.
And not needing to control them, but more just helping clear obstacles to them being fulfilled and full of purpose. And the final thing is we found the same 24 purpose types that there are for individuals. So you're a catalyst, I'm an empowerer. The same thing holds true for organizations. At these same 24 patterns, there's a dominant pattern in a culture. And the more aligned a team is on the purpose type of that organization, the stronger the culture and the stronger the sense of a single team. Mm-hmm. So the companies we've studied that have been the most cohesive, strong cultures are the ones where the majority of employees really feel like the organization is of the same purpose type as a culture. So really encourage leaders to think about what is the purpose type of your organization and how aligned is your team on that fact.
I'm going to link to your website in the show notes and to where people can take this assessment if they became curious to know what their purpose type is. It was kind of pretty cool and interesting exercise to do. And so before we wrap up, I always ask everyone for one actionable tip that you can give that people can take right away. But before that, what's new and exciting on your horizon? Do you have just like a really quick kind of tweetable version of what you're working on now?
I mean, our goal, what we're focused on right now, which is a big, hairy, audacious goal, is really how do we double the number of purpose-oriented workers in the U.S. workforce? So if we're at 28% now, how do we become a workforce that is over 50% purpose-oriented? Yeah. That is our goal, and trying to find the right partners and the right opportunities to really impact that from education, talking to universities and even earlier stage to really thinking about the role parents need to play, et cetera, because we believe that it will improve the lives of millions, help the economy, and help society, unlike any other change in society, if we can figure out how to double the number of purpose-oriented workers.
Amazing. That's really important work. And, when you think about those numbers, man, like 28% sounds so dismal, and shooting for 50% just sounds so sad. But like, oh my God, that's double. That's
it's huge.
Double. Yeah.
Well, the big thing is to go from it being a minority to the majority so that we can reframe everything at work to say the norm is working to help others, not for money and status. And if we can make that shift, we hope that becomes a catalyst to your type of, really causing, the dominoes to start to fall.
Yeah. And I, personally, we can probably get into a philosophy conversation some other time, but there's nothing wrong with money and status, but it is not satisfying. Like that by itself does not deliver a sense of purpose. And that's where people often just find themselves. If that's all they're shooting for, it leaves them empty. So having those things, if they're important to you, fabulous. But it's through doing something that fulfills some kind of a need in, that you're creating something, that you're building something that serves society in some way, or that solves a problem. That's what gives you a feeling of accomplishment.
Well, I'll tell you a little secret. People who are purpose-oriented make as much, if not more money than those that aren't, and they are more likely to get promoted into leadership.
Yeah,
so if you actually care about status and money, the best thing to do is not care about it.
or not make that your
that's what gets your priority. Like that's just, it has to be secondary.
Yeah.
And when I talk to great leaders that get promoted into CEO roles or SVPs, The great ones aren't there for the title. They're like, I wanted the place where I could make the impact that I wanted to make in this organization. And that was the motivation.
Yeah.
It was not, I want to, I could do a better job. I want to be the person there. I want my family to be proud of me. Those things are all nice, but they saw a change they wanted to make, and they wanted to be in the seat that enabled them to have the impact they wanted.
Yeah. Yeah. And then you're truly productive, and your work makes a difference for both you and others. So, okay, people listening right now, what's one specific action that you can recommend that they take today, this week, to upgrade their own leadership skills or to upgrade their own career, especially given your area of specialty?
Yeah, I mean, Marshall Gans, who is this great faculty member at Harvard and helped Obama get elected and worked with Cesar Chavez back in the day, he talks about this fact that, to lead, you have to start with yourself. You go from self to us, which is the organization, to now, what are you doing in the world? So my advice is always to start with yourself and to ask yourself concretely, are you aware of how much purpose you have in your work today? How strong are your relationships? How much impact are you making? And are you growing the way you want? And to really reflect on that and see, are you where you want to be? And then secondly, to go on our site, imperative.com, and take this quick diagnostic. It's completely free. And gain insights about what really is going to bring purpose to you. Because until you're feeling that purpose, it's hard to help others. It's like the airplane rule where you got to put the oxygen mask on for yourself before you pull it down for your kids.
Right.
You need to be self-aware enough and to model the change before you try to help others.
Great tip. I love it. So, Aaron, if people want to stay in touch with you or learn more about you, where should they go?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, feel free to email me, aaron@imperative.com. And there's also a lot of information on our website. And if anyone's interested in having me come to your organization as a keynote speaker, aaronhurst.us has information about keynote opportunities.
Awesome. And like I said, I saw you in action, and it was a very effective keynote. I thought that you did a great job. I enjoyed it. And, I see a lot, of speakers and a lot of keynotes. And so that's not something that I say to everyone. So I appreciate your work. I appreciate that you came to share some of your insights with listeners of the Talent Grow Show. I hope that listeners take you up on that challenge of starting with yourself and figuring out your own sense of purpose. And then hopefully they'll begin to orient their teams towards this, hire the right people, and make everyone at work happier, more productive, more satisfied. What a great world it would be then, right?
Amen.
All right, Aaron, make today great. I don't think any episode has ever ended with a resounding amen, but I hope that you've got your hands up in the air clamoring for more, because I thought that this was really inspirational and totally doable. That's the thing. It is doable, even though it sounds like a really big goal. So check out the show notes at talentgrow.com/podcast/episode24 to get the links to Aaron's website and that tool that he offers for us to identify our own purpose and help others identify theirs, and that other kind of tool that he has for hiring organizations to help screen the right candidates, plus the books that we've mentioned. And this time, as I hinted before, I also have a brand new tool that I'm offering for free to you, the listeners of the Talent Grow Show. I have been working with leaders around the world for over 20 years and with Talent Grow for 10 years and interviewing some of them for this podcast for a year. So I have seen and heard about a lot of mistakes that are very common that a lot of leaders make, often unintentionally, and they cause a lot of problems for them down the road. So I want to help you identify those mistakes and avoid them or correct them. And this tool can help you do that. So make sure that you download the free tool called 10 Mistakes Leaders Make and How to Avoid Them. It is available in the show notes, and the link is talentgrow.com/10 mistakes. So go grab that. And also, as always, leave me a review on iTunes. Leave me a comment down below in the show notes. Send me an email, halelly@talentgrow.com, and tell me what you want to hear more of, what you want me to do differently. Give me some feedback and give me some input about how I can serve you better. I really appreciate that you've listened to the Talent Grow Show. I hope that you will listen to the next episode in a couple of weeks. And in the meantime, as always, make today great.
Thanks for listening to the Talent Grow Show, where we help you develop your talent to become the kind of leader that people want to follow. For more information, visit talentgrow.com.